Jesse Coleman was 39 years old and worked night shifts repairing medical equipment in Nashville. Most people at Vanderbilt University Medical Center thought he was just another quiet technician in faded blue coveralls. He drove an old Ford F-15, ate gas station sandwiches at 1 a.m., and spent weekends fixing tools in his garage instead of buying new ones. What nobody knew was that Jesse had access to every maintenance log, hallway timestamp, and security camera tied to the hospital system. At 2:17 in the morning, his phone vibrated with a call from his sister saying his father was dying. At the exact same moment, Vanessa tightened her trembling hand around his wrist from the hospital bed and whispered, "Please don't leave me tonight." Before we go deeper into Jesse's story, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. And if you enjoy slow burn stories about betrayal, quiet revenge, and men people underestimate, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story might hit even harder than this one. The fluorescent lights in room 614 never dimmed completely. Even at 2 in the morning, Vanderbilt University Medical Center still carried the sharp smell of disinfectant, overheated coffee, and exhausted people trying not to fall apart in public. Jesse Coleman sat in the hard plastic chair beside Vanessa's hospital bed with both elbows on his knees and his phone clenched in one hand. The screen glowed against his fingers. Rachel calling. Again. Vanessa looked pale beneath the hospital lighting. Her mascara had smudged near the corners of her eyes. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside her bed. Slow. Consistent. Nothing urgent about it. Still, Tracy, every time Jesse stood up, she reached for him. "Please," she whispered again. "Don't go." Her fingers wrapped around his wrist tightly enough that he could feel the pressure through his flannel sleeve. Jesse looked toward the doorway. Nurses walked past without rushing. No alarms. No doctors sprinting down the hall. Just the ordinary rhythm of a long Nashville night inside a hospital. His phone buzzed again. This time, Rachel left a voicemail. Jesse stared at it for 2 seconds before putting the phone face down on his thigh. Vanessa swallowed hard. "Are you leaving?" "No," he said quietly. "I'm here." The words came automatically. That was the kind of man Jesse had always been. When his father's transmission shop almost collapsed during the recession in 2009, Jesse skipped community college classes to help keep the place open. When Rachel got divorced and needed somewhere to stay with her 2 kids, Jesse spent 6 weekends remodeling his garage apartment for free. And when Vanessa came into his life 5 years earlier with bright white teeth, expensive perfume, and a voice that always sounded half broken, underneath the confidence, Jesse treated her like someone he needed to protect. Even after she became successful online, especially after that. Vanessa had built a following giving wellness advice to suburban women around Tennessee. Smoothie routines, meditation clips, fitness partnerships, couples content. Her Instagram had crossed 400,000 followers the previous winter. People recognized her at restaurants now. They never recognized Jesse. He preferred it that way. Another vibration hit his hand. This time he answered. "Rachel." Her breathing came through sharp and uneven. "Where are you at Vanderbilt?" There was silence on the line for a second. Then Rachel lowered her voice. "Jesse, Dad's asking for you." Jesse closed his eyes. Somewhere down the hallway, a supply cart rattled over tile. "How bad?" he asked. The pause before her answer told him more than the words themselves. "The doctor said it could be Hours, Rachel whispered. Maybe less. Jesse rubbed his forehead hard enough to leave red marks. Harold Coleman had spent 37 years rebuilding engines with his bare hands. He was the kind of man who carried folded cash instead of cards and kept old bolts sorted in coffee cans labeled with black marker. 3 months earlier, doctors found late-stage pancreatic cancer. By January, he needed help walking. By March, he barely recognized mornings from evenings. And now it was almost April. Vanessa shifted weakly in bed behind him. Is that your sister? Jesse nodded once. Rachel continued speaking softly into the phone. He woke up 10 minutes ago, asking if you were coming. Jesse looked toward Vanessa again. She watched him carefully now. Not scared anymore. Watching. He had another episode earlier, Rachel said. His blood pressure keeps dropping. Jesse stood up from the chair and walked toward the hallway doors. His boots squeaked softly against the polished floor. How long would it take me to get there? He asked. 25 minutes if traffic's clear. Jesse looked through the small window in Vanessa's room door. She looked tiny in the hospital bed, fragile. A nurse adjusted her IV line while Vanessa turned her face away and wiped at her eyes. Rachel spoke again. Jess, I know you love her, but this is Dad. The sentence landed hard, not because it sounded cruel, because it sounded true. Jesse pressed his thumb against his eyebrow. His head felt heavy from lack of sleep. He had been awake almost 22 hours after finishing an overnight maintenance shift before Vanessa collapsed during her wellness event at the Omni Hotel downtown. Or at least that was how she described it. Difficulty breathing, chest tightness, dizziness. The ambulance brought her in just before midnight. Jesse had stayed beside her ever since. I can try to leave for an hour, he said quietly. Before Rachel could answer, Vanessa's voice cut through the doorway behind him. Jesse. He turned. Vanessa looked terrified now. Real tears rolled across her cheeks. Please don't leave me alone here. The nurse stepped out of the room carrying a clipboard. Jesse stopped her immediately. How serious is her condition? The nurse gave the careful expression medical workers used when they were too tired to explain things twice. She's stable right now, the nurse said, but stress could worsen symptoms. The doctor still wants observation. Could she be discharged tonight? Probably not tonight. Probably. Not definite. Jesse looked back toward the hallway window overlooking Nashville. Rain streaked across the glass outside. Downtown lights blurred into yellow smears. Rachel was still waiting on the phone. Jess. He remembered being 14 years old beside his father under a broken pickup truck. Harold had grease across both hands and said something Jesse never forgot. The people who need you most rarely say it loud. Harold had said it while tightening a rusted bolt under summer heat. Now the memory hit him like a punch. Vanessa began crying harder inside the room. Not dramatic. Small sounds, weak sounds. Sounds that made Jesse feel guilty for even standing near the exit. Rachel exhaled slowly into the phone, defeated already. I'll tell him you're with Vanessa. Jesse's throat tightened. I'll come in the morning. Rachel didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded thinner than before. Okay. The call ended. Jesse stood motionless for several seconds. Then he walked back into room 614 and sat beside Vanessa again. The moment he took the chair, she grabbed his hand with both of hers and pressed it against her chest. I was scared you'd leave, she whispered. Jesse forced a tired smile. I said I'm here. Outside thunder rolled somewhere beyond the city skyline. At 3:11 a.m., his phone vibrated again. One missed call, Then another, then another. Jesse silenced the phone without looking. Vanessa fell asleep 30 minutes later, with her hand still resting against his arm. Jesse stayed awake beside her while the monitor beeped steadily in the dark. At 3:47 a.m., a final text message appeared on his screen from Rachel Coleman. Dad kept asking where you were. Harold Coleman died at 3:42 in the morning. Rachel texted the exact time. No extra words, no dramatic sentence, just numbers. 3:42 a.m. Jesse stared at the message until the screen dimmed in his hand. Jesse stared. The hospital room around him stayed quiet, except for the low electronic rhythm of Vanessa's monitor. She was asleep on her side now, breathing evenly beneath a white blanket pulled up to her shoulders. Outside the window, rain slid down the glass in long, crooked lines. Jesse stood slowly from the chair. His knees cracked from sitting too long. For a moment, he simply looked at Vanessa, at the IV taped to her arm, at the expensive gold necklace still hanging around her neck, despite hospital policy asking patients to remove jewelry. Then he walked into the hallway alone. The corridor smelled like stale coffee and sanitizer. A television near the nurses' station played muted weather updates. No one was watching. Jesse stopped beside a vending machine and pressed his thumb against the voicemail notification Rachel had sent earlier. His father's voice filled the silence immediately. Weak, rough, breathing hard between words. "Hey, Jess?" A long pause followed. Jesse could hear movement in the background. Machines. Someone speaking softly. "You probably got your hands full over there." Another breath. "I just wanted..." Static crackled briefly. Then Harold coughed. "Wanted to hear your voice one more time, son." Jesse shut his eyes instantly. His father tried to clear his throat again. "You always showed up. Don't carry this one too heavy." The voicemail ended there. No goodbye, no final speech, just empty silence. Jesse lowered the phone slowly. For several seconds, he couldn't move. His chest felt hollowed out from the inside. Not explosive grief, not cinematic grief, something quieter, something colder. He leaned both hands against the wall near the vending machine and bowed his head. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. A nurse passing by slowed, slightly glanced at him, then kept walking. People cried inside hospitals every hour of every day. Nobody stopped anymore. Jesse stayed there for almost 10 minutes before returning to Vanessa's room. She was awake now. Her phone screen reflected against her face in the dark room. The moment she saw him, she locked the screen quickly. "You okay?" she asked softly. Jesse nodded once. "My dad passed." Vanessa's expression shifted immediately. Her mouth parted slightly. She sat up straighter against the pillows. "Oh my God." Jesse looked down at the floor. She reached for his hand again. "I'm so sorry, babe." The words sounded correct. Perfect, even. But something inside Jesse noticed the delay before she spoke them. A tiny delay, almost like someone remembering lines. He hated himself for even noticing it. Vanessa squeezed his hand gently. "You should have woken me. You needed rest. I would have stayed awake for you." Jesse nodded again, but said nothing. The room fell quiet. Vanessa looked healthier now than she had a few hours earlier. Her color had returned. Her voice sounded stronger. Even her breathing seemed normal. Jesse noticed the untouched oxygen tube hanging beside the bed. He noticed the half-finished smoothie on the tray table. And he noticed Vanessa reaching for her phone every couple of minutes when she thought he wasn't looking. At 5:26 a.m., a young nurse entered the room carrying a tablet. "Good morning," she said with tired politeness. "Just checking vitals." Vanessa immediately slumped deeper into the bed again. Her voice softened, still feeling pressure in my chest. The nurse nodded while checking numbers on the monitor. Jesse watched silently. Years working around hospitals had taught him how to read body language better than most people realized. Not because he was a doctor, because machines told the truth and people often didn't. The monitor remained steady, heart rate normal, oxygen stable, no urgency. The nurse finished updating the chart and gave Vanessa a small smile. Dr. Patel should be back around 7 to discuss discharge possibilities. Vanessa blinked. Discharge? If everything stays stable. The nurse left. Vanessa immediately looked toward Jesse. "I don't think I'm ready to leave yet." Jesse rubbed his face with both hands. He had not slept. His father was dead. And suddenly, everything around him felt slightly out of alignment. Not wrong enough to accuse anyone, just off. "You need anything?" he asked quietly. Vanessa shook her head. "Just stay near me." Jesse nodded automatically again. Outside the room, dawn slowly turned the Nashville skyline gray-blue. At 6:10 a.m., Rachel called. This time, Jesse answered immediately. Her voice sounded exhausted. "You should come here." "I know." The silence between them carried weight now. Rachel had always been more openly emotional than Jesse. She cried at movies, raised her voice when angry, hugged people too long. Jesse had inherited Harold's quieter habits instead. When their mother left 20 years earlier, Harold never yelled once. He simply continued making breakfast every morning, like routine itself could hold a family together. Rachel sniffed softly on the line. He kept waking up asking if you made it yet. Jesse pressed his jaw tight. "I'm sorry." "I know." Another silence. Then Rachel asked carefully, "How's Vanessa?" Jesse looked over at the bed. Vanessa was scrolling through her phone again. "She's better." Rachel didn't answer for a second. Then she said something strange. "Well." Apparently she thought so too. Jesse frowned slightly. "What? One of the nurses here knows someone over there at Vanderbilt. She said Vanessa was asking about discharge paperwork hours ago." Jesse glanced toward Vanessa again. "What do you mean I don't know?" Rachel sounded uncertain now. "Forget it. Just come when you can." The call ended. Jesse stood motionless beside the window for a while. The city outside was fully awake now. Traffic moved below like slow rivers of red brake lights. Behind him, Vanessa suddenly spoke. "Can you grab me another charger from the car later?" Jesse turned around. She smiled weakly at him. Not grieving with him, not asking about funeral arrangements, not asking what Harold's last moments were like. Just a charger. Jesse told himself not to overthink it. People handle death differently. Shock made conversation strange. Still, something kept bothering him. At 7:04 a.m., Dr. Patel finally entered the room. Middle-aged, calm voice, reading glasses hanging from his collar. He reviewed Vanessa's chart for less than 2 minutes. "How are we feeling?" "Still tired," Vanessa said. The doctor nodded. "Well, your cardiac tests are clear. Blood work looks good. We didn't find signs of anything immediately dangerous." Vanessa blinked quickly. "So, what caused it?" "Stress can manifest physically sometimes." He said it gently, professionally. Then he added the sentence Jesse would replay in his mind for months afterward. "You're medically stable to go home today if you'd like." Vanessa looked toward Jesse immediately before answering, like she needed to measure his reaction first. Maybe after some rest." Dr. Patel gave a small nod. "That's fine. No rush." He left the room moments later. Vanessa stayed quiet afterward. Too quiet. Jesse looked at the floor tiles beneath his boots. A thought entered his head then. Small. Sharp. If she was stable, why did she beg him not to leave? He hated himself the second the thought appeared, because his father was dead, and the woman beside him was supposed to be his safe place. At 7:41 a.m., another nurse walked in, carrying paperwork. She smiled politely at Vanessa. "Whenever you're ready, we can begin discharge." Then she looked toward Jesse and added casually, "Your wife actually asked for those forms before sunrise." The room went completely still. Vanessa answered too quickly. "I was confused earlier," but Jesse noticed it immediately. The nurse's expression changed for half a second. Tiny, awkward, like she realized she had said something she wasn't supposed to. And for the first time since Harold Coleman died, Jesse felt something colder than grief move quietly through his chest. Jesse Coleman spent the next morning arranging his father's funeral while wearing the same clothes from the night before. His flannel shirt still carried the stale smell of hospital air. His eyes burned from exhaustion. Every movement felt delayed by half a second, like his body was struggling to keep pace with reality. Rain covered Nashville in a dull gray haze as he drove north toward Woodlawn Roche Patton Funeral Home. Vanessa stayed behind at Vanderbilt, or at least that was what she told him. "I just need more rest," she had said while sitting upright in bed, scrolling through messages. "I'll probably sleep most of the day." Jesse nodded without questioning it. By then, he barely trusted his own thoughts. Grief distorted everything. He knew that much. The funeral home stood quiet beneath dripping oak trees off Thompson Lane. Brick walls, white columns, neatly trimmed hedges darkened by rainwater. Inside, everything smelled faintly of polished wood and lilies. A woman named Karen guided Jesse into a private office with soft lighting and leather chairs. She spoke gently, carefully, the way people in funeral homes always did. "Your father served in the Army," she asked, while reviewing paperwork. "Mechanic Division," Jesse answered. Karen smiled politely. "We can arrange military honors if your family wants that." Jesse rubbed his thumb slowly against the edge of the table. His father would have hated attention. "No ceremony," he said quietly. "Just family." Karen nodded and continued writing. Jesse stared at the frame paintings on the office wall while she explained pricing, transportation, casket options, obituary submissions. The words blurred together after a while. At one point she asked, "Would your wife be attending the arrangements later today?" Jesse hesitated. "She's in the hospital." Karen's face softened immediately. "I'm sorry. That's a lot at once." Jesse gave a small nod. He signed 3 forms without fully reading them. By 10:42 a.m., he walked back outside carrying a thin folder containing funeral schedules and payment receipts. Rainwater dripped from the edges of the building roof. Jesse stood beside his old Ford truck for a long moment before climbing inside. Then his work phone buzzed. Not a call. An automated notification. Maintenance access report generated. Jesse frowned slightly. The hospital system automatically sent reports whenever restricted service areas were accessed after hours. Most employees ignored them unless there was equipment theft or repair issues. Normally, Jesse would not even open it while off shift, but something about the timing bothered him. He unlocked the phone and scanned the report casually, then stopped breathing for a second. Access point Vibe, UMC South Service, exit time, 9:18 a.m. temporary visitor badge V. Coleman. Jesse stared at the screen. The rain tapped lightly against the windshield. Maybe there was a mistake. Hospitals made mistakes constantly. Wrong timestamps. Wrong badge scans. System glitches. Still, his thumb opened the detailed report automatically. Badge assigned Vanessa Coleman. Authorized through patient temporary mobility clearance. Jesse leaned back slowly in the driver's seat. The South Service exit was not the main discharge entrance. It connected to loading docks, maintenance corridors, and staff parking areas behind the hospital. Patients rarely used it. He checked the time again. 9:18 a.m. Less than 2 hours after Dr. Patel cleared Vanessa for discharge, Jesse looked out through the wet windshield toward passing traffic. A strange calm settled over him. Not anger, not yet, just attention. The kind his father taught him years ago while diagnosing engine failures. Don't assume. Check twice. Jesse started the truck and drove back toward Vanderbilt. The city streets looked washed out beneath the rain. Pedestrians hurried along sidewalks with coffee cups and umbrellas, while country music played quietly from the truck speakers. 20 minutes later, Jesse parked inside employee overflow parking near the maintenance wing. He still had clearance access. Most technicians did. Inside the building hospital, life moved normally around him. Stretchers rolled past. Phones rang. Elevators chimed. Nobody noticed Jesse walking toward the engineering department downstairs. That invisibility had followed him most of his adult life. People noticed surgeons, lawyers, influencers like Vanessa. Nobody paid attention to the quiet guy fixing broken infusion pumps at 3 a.m., which meant nobody noticed when Jesse logged into the maintenance review terminal. The screen glowed pale blue in the dim office. He typed in the timestamp. 9:18 a.m. South Service exit. The camera footage loaded instantly. Black and white security video appeared divided into 4 angles. Jesse watched the corridor feed first. At exactly 9:17:42, Vanessa appeared on screen, walking normally. No wheelchair, no nurse assisting her, no visible weakness. Her hair had been brushed carefully. Lip gloss reflected faintly beneath fluorescent lights. She wore the same cream-colored sweater from the night before, but now it looked adjusted neat, intentional. She checked her phone while walking, then she smiled. Not weakly, not tired, smiled. Jesse felt something tighten behind his ribs. The footage continued. A man entered frame near the exit doors. Tall, athletic build, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. Even through grainy footage, Jesse recognized him immediately. Travis Reed, owner of Iron Vale Performance Gym in Brentwood, Vanessa's brand collaborator, the same man who appeared in her workout videos 3 months earlier, holding protein shakes beside her, while thousands of followers commented about their chemistry. Vanessa once laughed about it at dinner. People online invent fantasies, babe. Jesse remembered believing her without hesitation. Now he watched Travis place one hand lightly against Vanessa's lower back as the automatic doors opened. Familiar. Comfortable. Vanessa tilted her head toward him and laughed about something Jesse could not hear. Then both disappeared outside. The camera angle switched automatically to parking lot footage. A black BMW X5 waited near the curb. Travis opened the passenger door for her. Vanessa climbed inside. Before the door shut, she looked back toward the hospital entrance once, still smiling. Then the SUV drove away. The footage ended. Jesse sat perfectly still in the dark office. No dramatic reaction came. No shouting, no smashing keyboards. His father had just died less than 8 hours earlier. And somehow, that grief still sat heavier than betrayal. Jesse replayed the footage once more. This time slower. Timestamp accurate. Badge accurate. Vehicle visible. No confusion, no misunderstanding. He paused the frame where Travis touched Vanessa's back. Then Jesse quietly exported the footage. Not because he fully understood why, yet. Instinct. Nothing more. The file transferred onto the secure maintenance archive. Jesse copied it to an external backup drive from his work bag. Years fixing hospital systems had trained him to preserve records before asking questions. Systems changed. Logs disappeared. People denied things. Data mattered. His phone rang suddenly beside the keyboard. Woodlawn Roche Patton Funeral Home. Jesse answered immediately. "Mr. Coleman," Karen said softly, "we just needed confirmation on your father's viewing schedule." Jesse stared at the frozen image of Vanessa inside the BMW. "Yes," he answered quietly. While Karen spoke about flower arrangements and transport timing, Jesse kept looking at the pause frame. Not at Travis, at Vanessa, at how relaxed she looked less than 6 hours after begging him not to leave her bedside, while his father died asking for him. Karen finished speaking. "Mr. Coleman." Jesse blinked slowly. "Sorry," he said. "Go ahead." Outside the small maintenance office window, thunder rolled across Nashville again. And for the first time since Harold Coleman's death, Jesse stopped feeling confused. Something inside him had begun organizing itself. Quietly, carefully. Like a man reaching for tools before starting a difficult repair. Jesse Coleman did not confront Vanessa that day. He drove home through the rain with the hospital footage sitting silently on a flash drive inside his jacket pocket. And he never mentioned Travis Reed's name once. By noon, Nashville traffic had thickened beneath low gray clouds. Downtown construction crews worked through drizzle while country radio hosts joked about flooding near Franklin Road. Everything outside continued normally. Inside Jesse's truck, nothing felt normal anymore. He stopped at a red light near Demon Bruin Street and looked at his reflection in the windshield. 39 years old, tired eyes, oil-stained hands, a man whose father had died alone while his wife climbed into another man's SUV. The thought should have made him furious. Instead, it made him careful. That part came from Harold Coleman, too. His father used to say anger was expensive because it made people sloppy. Jesse could almost hear the old man's voice now. If something feels wrong, stop talking and start checking. By the time Jesse pulled into the driveway of the small brick house he shared with Vanessa in Hendersonville, the rain had weakened to a cold mist. The house looked exactly the same as always. White porch railing, black shutters. Vanessa's potted plants lined neatly beside the front steps. Normal. Ordinary. Like betrayal could live inside a perfectly maintained home and never disturb the paint. Jesse walked inside quietly. The living room still smelled faintly of Vanessa's vanilla candles. A folded yoga mat leaned beside the couch. Ring lights and filming equipment sat near the dining room wall where she usually recorded content. He stared at them for several seconds. Then he walked past everything and headed straight toward the garage behind the house. Most people who visited thought it was a cluttered workshop. That assumption suited Jesse fine. Inside shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Plastic bins labeled with dates, diagnostic tools, backup hard drives, calibration equipment from hospital contracts, work tables covered in organized cables and repair kits. Nothing flashy, everything precise. Jesse closed the garage door behind him and sat at the steel workbench near the back wall. Then he plugged the flash drive into his desktop computer. The hospital footage appeared again. Vanessa exiting through the south service hallway, Travis touching her back, the BMW waiting outside. Jesse watched it 3 times without expression. Then he opened another browser window and typed Travis Reed Nashville. Results appeared immediately. Fitness interviews, local business articles, Instagram pages, a podcast clip titled Building Discipline Through Elite Performance. Jesse clicked nothing at first. He simply looked. Travis Reed was 42, former college athlete, owned 2 luxury fitness facilities in Brentwood and Green Hills, drove expensive cars, sponsored local influencer events, including several events Vanessa attended. Jesse remembered them now. Late-night networking dinners, weekend wellness retreats, brand meetings. He remembered Vanessa laughing whenever he asked too many questions. "You hate social media stuff anyway, babe." Maybe she was right. Jesse had never understood people who filmed themselves eating salads while strangers typed heart emojis underneath. Still, he remembered one specific night 6 months earlier. Vanessa came home wearing a black athletic jacket with iron veil stitched across the chest. "Free merch," she said casually. Now Jesse sat motionless in the garage, staring at Travis Reed's face on the computer screen. Perfect teeth, expensive watch, confident smile. The kind of man Jesse normally ignored. His phone buzzed suddenly. "Vanessa." Jesse let it ring twice before answering. "Hey," she said softly. Her voice sounded healthy. Too healthy. "You still at the hospital, huh?" "They're keeping me a little longer for observation." Jesse leaned back slowly in his chair. The lie arrived so smoothly, it almost impressed him. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired." Behind her, Jesse heard traffic noise. Not hospital noise. Traffic. Then a car horn. Vanessa spoke again quickly. "Can you bring me a charger later?" Jesse looked at the paused security frame on his monitor. "You already left the hospital." Silence. Tiny, sharp. Then Vanessa laughed nervously. "What?" Jesse kept his voice calm. "The discharge log showed you left this morning." Another pause. "Longer this time." "I stepped outside for air," she answered carefully. "With Travis Reed." The silence afterwards stretched so long Jesse could hear her breathing change. Not sadness, calculation. Finally she spoke. "He picked me up because I didn't feel safe driving." Jesse said nothing. Vanessa continued quickly now. "You're making this sound weird." Jesse stared at the workbench surface. "My father died while I stayed beside your hospital bed. I know that. You told me you were scared to be alone." "I was." Jesse closed his eyes briefly. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "Were you ever actually sick?" Vanessa inhaled sharply. "Wow." The single word came out cold. Offended, not hurt. Are you seriously doing this right now after what I've been through? Jesse looked again at the footage timestamp. 9:18 a.m., smiling, walking normally, getting into Travis's BMW. What exactly did you go through? Jesse asked quietly. Vanessa's tone hardened instantly. You know what? I'm not having this conversation while you're emotional. Emotional. Not grieving. Not devastated. Emotional. Jesse noticed the difference immediately. I need space, Vanessa continued. I'm staying with friends tonight, Travis. You're unbelievable. The call disconnected. Jesse lowered the phone slowly. Then he reopened the hospital export files. Something still bothered him. Not emotionally. Technically. He opened the discharge records tied to Vanessa's temporary patient file. The system showed discharge authorization at 8:53 a.m. Patient release signed electronically. No physician concerns. No cardiac instability. No respiratory distress. Jesse leaned forward closer to the screen. Then he noticed another line. Transport declined by patient. Meaning, Vanessa specifically refused wheelchair assistance or monitored release. Because she did not need it. Jesse copied the report immediately. Backup folder. Timestamp preserved. His father's voice echoed in memory again. Check twice. Jesse continued. Next came the joint banking app. He logged in quietly using saved credentials. Nothing unusual appeared at first. Utility bills. Mortgage payment. Restaurant charge from 3 days earlier. Then he saw it. The Joseph Nashville Hotel. $742.18. Timestamp 10:06 a.m. Less than 1 hour after Vanessa left the hospital. Jesse stared at the charge for several seconds without moving. Luxury suite pricing, day booking, 2 guests, some probably. Still, he did not react outwardly. No yelling, no throwing things. He simply downloaded the transaction receipt into another folder. Outside rainwater dripped steadily from the garage roof. The clock on the wall read 1:14 p.m. His father's body was still waiting at the funeral home. And somehow, he now sat surrounded by evidence instead of memories. He hated that. More than the cheating itself. He hated that betrayal had entered the same space as grief. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. You okay? She asked immediately. Jesse looked around the garage, at the organized shelves, at the tools his father helped him buy years earlier. No, Jesse answered honestly. Rachel stayed quiet for a moment. Then she asked carefully, Is it Vanessa? Jesse considered lying. Instead, he said, I think she kept me there on purpose. The silence on Rachel's end became heavy. Finally, she whispered, Jesus. Jesse rubbed both hands over his face. I have proof she left the hospital with another man. Rachel sounded angry instantly. Who? Travis Reed. Oh, that gym guy. Jesse frowned slightly. You know him? Vanessa talked about him constantly last summer. Jesse said nothing, because he suddenly realized something worse. Other people had noticed things before he did. Rachel exhaled sharply. Jess, what are you going to do? Jesse looked back toward the computer screen. Security footage frozen mid-frame. Vanessa smiling before entering Travis's SUV. And for the first time since discovering everything, Jesse answered without hesitation. "I'm going to stop talking," he said quietly. Then he opened another folder and began saving copies of every record he could find. The garage behind Jesse Coleman's house became quieter after midnight. Not silent. Never silent. The old refrigerator near the back wall hummed unevenly. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof. Somewhere outside, tires hissed along the wet Hendersonville streets. Jesse sat alone at the steel workbench, wearing the same dark hoodie he had pulled on 12 hours earlier. 3 monitors glowed in front of him. Hospital logs on one screen. Bank records on another. Security footage paused on the third. Most people would not have recognized the room for what it actually was. They saw tools and cables and assumed it belonged to a mechanic who repaired appliances for extra cash. But Jesse's garage had evolved slowly over 15 years. Calibration systems, encrypted backups, contract repair software. He used the space for independent medical equipment inspections outside his hospital shifts. Small clinics across Tennessee hired him quietly because Jesse's reports were accurate and he never cut corners. That was the part people missed about quiet men. Silence did not mean lack of ability. Sometimes it meant concentration. Jesse opened another folder and began organizing files by timestamp. 9:18 a.m. South service exit footage. 8:53 a.m. discharge authorization. 10:06 a.m. hotel transaction. He labeled everything carefully. No emotion in the file names. Just facts. Outside the garage window, lightning flashed briefly over Nashville. Jesse leaned back in his chair and rubbed at the exhaustion behind his eyes. His father was dead. That reality still hit hardest whenever his mind slowed down for more than a few seconds. Every now and then he almost reached for his phone to call Harold automatically. Then remembered. Gone. The ache arrived fresh each time. He looked toward the old Craftsman toolbox against the wall. Harold bought it for him when he turned 21. Cheap tools make expensive mistakes, his father used to say. Jesse stared at it quietly before returning to work. Another banking notification appeared. He clicked it immediately. The Joseph Nashville Hotel. Room service. Charge $118.47. Timestamp 1:42 p.m. Jesse checked the current time. 1:49 p.m., meaning Vanessa and Travis were still there. Still spending money from the joint account less than 12 hours after Harold Coleman died. Jesse inhaled slowly through his nose, then exported the statement. Folder updated. He opened a second browser window and searched the hotel layout. Luxury suites, private elevators, rooftop restaurant. The kind of place Vanessa loved photographing for social media. Jesse remembered her once calling hotels like that aspirational environments. He had laughed because he thought she was joking. Now he understood she meant it seriously. His phone buzzed on the workbench. Vanessa. Jesse let it ring out. Seconds later, a text appeared. Can you stop being dramatic and answer me? Jesse read the message once, then placed the phone face down again. 5 minutes later, another message came. You disappearing like, this is unhealthy. Then another. I already told you Travis was helping me. Jesse stared at the glowing screen. No apology, no mention of Harold, no acknowledgement that he missed his father's final hours. Only management, control, narrative. That realization disturbed him more than cheating itself, because it meant Vanessa already believed she could shape the story however she wanted. Jesse stood from the chair and walked toward the garage sink. Cold water ran over his hands while he stared at the concrete floor. He remembered the first year he met Vanessa. She had been working part-time at a boutique gym near Franklin while trying to build a social media following. Jesse fixed the gym's broken HVAC system one summer afternoon, and Vanessa brought him bottled water because the building felt like an oven. She smiled at him like he mattered. At least that was how it felt back then. Jesse had spent most of his life being invisible beside louder men. Vanessa changed that for a while. She asked questions, listened carefully, touched his arm when he spoke. And Jesse, who trusted slowly but deeply, built an entire future around those small moments. Now he wondered how much of it had been performance. The thought made his stomach feel heavy. His phone buzzed again. Rachel this time. "You eat anything today?" she asked immediately. Jesse looked toward an untouched protein bar near the keyboard. "No. You need to. I'm fine." Rachel ignored the answer. "Funeral home called me too. We need clothes for Dad tomorrow." Jesse nodded automatically before realizing she could not see him. "I'll bring the Navy suit." Rachel hesitated. Then carefully, any word from Vanessa, Jesse looked toward the monitor showing hotel transactions. "She's busy." Rachel went quiet. "You want to tell me what's happening?" Jesse considered how much to say. Finally, he answered calmly. "She left the hospital with Travis Reed. They checked into the Joseph using our account." Rachel cursed under her breath immediately. Jesse sat back down slowly at the workbench. "She kept me there while Dad was dying. That woman is unbelievable." Jesse stared at the screen without speaking. Rachel's anger kept building. "I swear to God, if I see her at the funeral, she probably won't come." The sentence settled heavily between them. Rachel lowered her voice. "Jess, you can't let her manipulate this." Jesse's eyes moved across the organized folders on his monitor. "Logs, footage, receipts, proof." "I'm not planning to." "You gonna confront her?" "No." Rachel sounded confused. "Why not?" "Because confrontation without preparation only helps liars." Jesse did not say the sentence out loud. Instead, he answered simply, "Because I want everything documented first." Rachel exhaled slowly. For a moment, Jesse heard his father in both of them. Harold always approached problems like damaged machinery. Do not kick it. Understand it first. Rachel finally said quietly, "Dad would be proud of how calm you're staying." Jesse looked down at his hands. Grease still stained the lines of his knuckles from work earlier that week. "No," he answered softly. "Dad would have wanted me there." The silence afterward hurt more than anything else. After the call ended, Jesse remained motionless for several minutes. Then he reopened the hospital export system again. He checked visitor parking timestamps connected to Travis Reed's vehicle. There it was. Black BM 5 entered, 8:51 a.m. exited 9:21 a.m., meaning Travis arrived before Vanessa officially left. Waiting already. Planned. Jesse copied the record. Another folder. Another timestamp. His computer desktop now looked like an investigation board assembled by someone who trusted evidence more than emotion. Because Jesse did. Not naturally. Learned behavior. Years repairing expensive medical systems taught him one brutal truth: machines only fail for specific reasons. People lie about those reasons constantly. At 3:08 p.m., Vanessa texted again. "You're making yourself look unstable." Jesse stared at the message for several seconds. Then another followed. Don't turn your father's death into guilt manipulation. That one landed differently. Not loud, not explosive, cold. Jesse read it twice, then once more. His father had been dead less than 12 hours, and Vanessa already sounded annoyed that grief interfered with her control over the situation. Jesse slowly opened a new folder. He named it Vanessa. Then he saved screenshots of every message. Outside thunder rolled low across the Tennessee sky. Jesse leaned back in the chair and looked around the garage again. The organized shelves, the tools, the backup drives humming quietly beneath the desk. Most people who met him saw an exhausted technician with old boots and a second-hand truck. Vanessa probably saw that too. What she never understood was that Jesse spent his entire adult life solving problems patiently, quietly, one piece at a time. And for the first time since Harold Coleman died, Jesse stopped thinking like a husband trying to save a marriage. He started thinking like a man preserving evidence before a system failure became permanent. Then his phone lit up once more. Vanessa again. This time the message was shorter. We need to get our story straight before people start asking questions. Jesse stared at the screen, and something inside him became very still. Harold Coleman's funeral took place beneath a gray Tennessee sky 3 days later. The rain had finally stopped sometime before sunrise, but the air still carried the damp chill left behind by the storm. Water clung to the cemetery grass in silver beads, while black sedans rolled slowly into the parking lot beside the small chapel. Jesse arrived first. Of course he did. He stood near the chapel entrance wearing Harold's old Navy suit tailored to fit his broader shoulders. The fabric smelled faintly like cedar from years inside a garment bag. Rachel hugged him the moment she stepped out of her SUV. Neither of them cried immediately. Grief had moved beyond dramatic reactions by then. It sat heavier, quieter. Rachel pulled back first and looked toward the parking lot. Vanessa coming. Jesse adjusted the cuff of his jacket calmly. She said she wasn't feeling well. Rachel's jaw tightened instantly, but she said nothing. People continued arriving in slow clusters. Former mechanics from Harold's old transmission shop, neighbors from Hendersonville, 2 veterans wearing faded American Legion caps, a retired tow truck driver named Pete, who still smelled like cigarettes and motor oil. They all shook Jesse's hand with the same expression, respect mixed with pity. Harold Coleman had been the kind of man people trusted with keys, money, and hard truths. Not charming, not polished, reliable. Men like that left noticeable silence behind them. Inside the chapel, soft piano music played through ceiling speakers, while funeral home staff arranged flowers near the casket. Jesse stood beside Harold's body for several moments before the service began. The old man looked unfamiliar without grease stains on his hands. That bothered Jesse more than the coffin itself. Harold never belonged in clean clothes. Rachel stepped beside him quietly. He looks peaceful. Jesse nodded once. But peace was not the word in his head. Absent felt closer. The room slowly filled with low conversations and careful footsteps. Still, no Vanessa. At 10:14 a.m., Jesse's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He checked the screen automatically. Vanessa had posted a new Instagram story. Jesse stared at it for several seconds. Black background, white text. Protect your peace even when people try to drown you in guilt. Soft piano music layered underneath. Thousands of followers would probably interpret it as grief or emotional exhaustion or strength. Jesse noticed something else instead. The location tag. The Joseph Nashville Hotel. His thumb tightened slightly around the phone. Then another detail appeared beneath the story. Liked by Travis Reed. A minute later, Travis commented publicly, "Proud of your strength through all this." Jesse looked at the glowing screen without expression, then locked the phone and placed it back inside his pocket. Rachel noticed immediately. "What? Nothing." "Jess." He shook his head once. "Not today." Rachel studied him carefully. Then she understood from his face alone. Her eyes darkened instantly. "She posted something, didn't she?" Jesse said nothing, which was enough answer. Rachel looked ready to explode. Instead, she inhaled sharply and turned toward the chapel windows. That woman couldn't even wait until after the funeral. Jesse remained still beside the casket because Rachel was wrong. Vanessa had not waited until after the funeral. She had not even waited until Harold was buried. Guests slowly took their seats. The pastor began speaking near the front podium while muted sunlight filtered through stained glass windows overhead. Jesse barely heard most of the sermon. He watched details instead. Pete wiping his eyes with rough knuckles. Rachel holding a tissue against her mouth. An elderly mechanic named Warren standing stiffly in the back because his knees could no longer bend properly. Real people grieving honestly. No performance. No audience. Halfway through the service, Jesse's mind drifted unexpectedly toward the last voicemail again. "You always showed up." The sentence kept replaying, like his father had known exactly where Jesse's guilt would settle after he died. At one point, the pastor invited anyone who wished to speak forward. Silence filled the chapel initially. Then Warren slowly stood. The old mechanic removed his cap before approaching the podium. "Harold Coleman once rebuilt my transmission for half price because he knew my wife had cancer," Warren said roughly. "Never told anybody he did it either." Several people smiled faintly. Warren looked toward Jesse. "Your dad believed quiet work mattered more than loud talk." Jesse lowered his eyes. The sentence landed harder than Warren probably intended. After the service ended, mourners drifted outside toward the cemetery behind the chapel. Clouds moved slowly overhead while workers lowered Harold's casket beside the open grave. Jesse stood closest, hands folded, face calm. Inside, something else entirely moved beneath the surface now. Not rage, recognition. Piece by piece, he was beginning to understand the kind of woman Vanessa truly was, and understanding felt colder than heartbreak. After the burial, people approached one by one, offering condolences. Jesse thanked them politely, shook hands, accepted hugs, all while his phone continued vibrating quietly inside his pocket, with social media notifications connected to Vanessa's posts. At 1:26 p.m., Rachel finally snapped. She pulled Jesse aside near the parking lot. "She's posting selfies." Jesse looked at her. Rachel shoved her own phone forward angrily. Vanessa sat beside a rooftop pool wearing sunglasses and a cream-colored sweater. Caption, "Healing privately." "Some pain doesn't belong online." Travis's reflection appeared faintly in the window behind her. Jesse noticed it immediately. Rachel looked furious enough to shake. "Are you kidding me?" Jesse handed the phone back calmly. "Don't comment. I wasn't planning to. Don't text her either." Rachel stared at him. "How are you this calm Jesse looked toward the cemetery. Fresh dirt covered his father's grave beneath rows of wet flowers. Because she wants a reaction, Rachel crossed her arms tightly. You already know she's cheating. Yes. She kept you away from Dad. Yes. She's humiliating you online during the funeral. Jesse's jaw tightened slightly. Still calm. Yes. Rachel threw both hands upward. Then why are you acting like this is some business meeting? Because emotions disappear in courtrooms. Because lies collapse slower than people think. Because Harold Coleman raised a son who understood systems better than arguments. But Jesse answered more simply. Because I need facts first. Rachel looked at him for several seconds. Then her expression softened slightly. That sounded exactly like Dad. The sentence stayed with Jesse long after she walked away. By late afternoon, most guests had left. Only a few cars remained near the cemetery. Jesse stayed behind alone beside Harold's grave while workers removed folding chairs nearby. Wind moved softly through the trees overhead. For the first time all day, the world felt quiet again. Then someone approached from behind. An older man in a charcoal overcoat, silver hair, leather briefcase. Jesse. Jesse turned immediately. Mr. Holloway. Martin Holloway had been Harold's attorney for almost 20 years. The older man shook Jesse's hand firmly before glancing toward the grave. Your father made me promise not to bother you with paperwork today, Holloway said. But he also knew you'd ignore me if I waited too long. Jesse managed the faintest hint of a smile. That sounded accurate. Holloway reached into his briefcase and removed a thick, sealed envelope. Your father left instructions for this to go directly to you after the burial. Jesse accepted it carefully. The envelope felt heavier than expected. Documents inside. Multiple. Holloway lowered his voice slightly. He updated several things before he passed. Jesse frowned. What things? The attorney adjusted his coat against the wind. He said you'd understand once you read everything. Then Holloway paused. And Jesse, yes, your father was worried about you. The sentence landed differently now. Not because Harold feared death, because he feared something else before he died. Something connected to Jesse's life, to Vanessa, to things Jesse still did not fully see yet. Holloway nodded once toward the envelope. Read it somewhere private. Then the attorney walked slowly back toward the parking lot. Jesse remained beside the grave, holding the envelope in both hands, while cold wind moved across the cemetery. The sun had begun lowering behind the trees by then, and for the first time since this nightmare started, Jesse felt the shape of something larger forming underneath everything he thought he understood. Jesse Coleman did not open the envelope at the cemetery. He waited until nightfall. The house in Hendersonville felt hollow when he returned alone. No television noise. No music from Vanessa's yoga playlists. No smell of candles drifting from the kitchen. Only silence. The kind that settles into corners after somebody dies. Jesse placed his keys carefully on the counter and loosened his tie. His shoulders ached from exhaustion. He had slept maybe 4 hours total across the last 4 days. Still, he carried the envelope directly into the garage before doing anything else. Rain had started again outside. Soft this time. Steady enough to tap against the metal roof like slow fingertips. Jesse sat at the steel workbench beneath the hanging task light and finally turned the envelope over in his hands. Harold Coleman estate documents. Martin Holloway's handwriting sat beneath the printed label. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional. That felt exactly like Harold. Jesse opened the seal carefully. Several folders slid onto the table. Property deeds, legal transfer documents, business ownership forms. Jesse frowned immediately. He picked up the first document. East Nashville Commercial Property Transfer. New owner, Jesse Coleman. The address looked familiar. Too familiar. Jesse leaned back slightly in the chair. Harold's old garage, not the small home workshop from Jesse's childhood, the larger property near Dickerson Pike. An industrial building Harold quietly purchased years earlier after closing the transmission shop. Jesse had not stepped inside it in almost a decade. He remembered concrete floors, hydraulic lifts, storage bays, the smell of metal dust, and gasoline. His father rarely talked about the property after retirement. Jesse continued reading. The garage had already been transferred into Jesse's name 6 weeks earlier. Tax paid. Ownership complete. No liens. Another folder contained something else entirely. Coleman Medical Calibration Services, LLC. Jesse blinked. He turned pages slowly. The company owned contracts with 3 rural clinics outside Nashville and 2 small rehabilitation centers near Murfreesboro. Annual revenue estimates appeared on the last page. Jesse stared at the number for several seconds. His father had quietly built a profitable equipment calibration company after retiring from transmission work, and Jesse had inherited controlling ownership. Not flashy wealth, not millionaire money, but real assets, commercial property, recurring contracts, protected accounts, the kind of stability most people never noticed because Harold never displayed it. Jesse rubbed his hand slowly across his mouth. Vanessa never knew about any of this, not fully. She knew Jesse did independent equipment work on weekends. She thought it brought in extra side income. She never asked deeper questions because Jesse never volunteered details. That was how he was raised. Real money stayed quiet. Another folded paper sat near the bottom of the envelope. A handwritten note from Harold. Jess, if you're reading this, then I ran out of time. You always think silence fixes problems. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it only gives dishonest people more room. There are things about Vanessa I should have told you earlier. I kept hoping I was wrong. That sentence stopped Jesse cold. He unfolded the second page. I saw enough to know she doesn't respect loyalty the same way you do. You love deeply. That makes you useful to selfish people. Don't let grief make you blind after I'm gone. Jesse lowered the paper slowly. The rain outside suddenly sounded louder against the roof. Harold knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Jesse looked toward the dark garage shelves surrounding him. His father spent his final months carrying this suspicion alone while cancer hollowed him out from the inside. That realization hurt differently. Not explosive pain, a quieter kind. Like discovering someone had been standing guard over you while dying. Jesse swallowed hard and continued reading through the remaining files. One document caught his attention immediately. Home Equity Access Request. Denied applicant. Inquiry. Vanessa Coleman. Timestamp. 3 months earlier. Jesse frowned. He remembered Vanessa casually asking about refinancing during winter. At the time, she framed it as financial optimization. Jesse never followed through because interest rates looked terrible. Now he realized something else. Vanessa had tried contacting the bank separately afterward. without telling him. The request failed because the house ownership structure was incomplete under her authorization. Jesse leaned back slowly in the chair. The house technically belonged to a family trust Harold established years earlier after Jesse's mother left. Jesse handled mortgage payments and taxes, but the property itself was protected. Vanessa apparently did not know that. Another detail clicked into place. Her recent obsession with branding deals, luxury purchases, trips, the constant pressure to upgrade their lifestyle. She thought Jesse was financially small because he dressed plainly and drove an old truck. She mistook restraint for lack. Jesse almost laughed at the irony, not because it felt satisfying, because it felt tragic. He remembered Vanessa once mocking his work boots during a dinner party. "You'd look more successful if you dressed like it." Everyone laughed politely. Jesse laughed too. Harold did not. Now Jesse understood why his father watched Vanessa so carefully after that night. The garage door rattled softly from wind outside. Jesse gathered the documents into organized stacks. Property, business, bank records. Then he noticed something tucked beneath the final folder. An old silver laptop. Harold's. A yellow sticky note rested on top. Password 1978 FORD. Jesse stared at the handwriting for several seconds before opening the laptop slowly. The machine booted with painful slowness. Outdated, old-fashioned, exactly like Harold. Finally, the desktop loaded. Only a few folders appeared. Taxes, contracts, medical records. Then one labeled Jesse. Jesse clicked it. Inside sat a single draft email. Not sent. No recipient listed. Timestamp from 5 weeks earlier. Jesse opened it slowly. The first line hit immediately. "Jess, I need you to pay attention before it's too late." Jesse's jaw tightened. Attached beneath the draft were 3 image files. He opened the first. Vanessa sitting outside a restaurant in downtown Franklin. Across from Travis Reed. Wine glasses on the table. Close together. Too close. The second image showed Travis touching Vanessa's back outside Iron Vale Gym. The third showed them entering the Joseph Nashville Hotel together. Date: almost 2 months earlier. Jesse stared at the screen without blinking. His father had investigated quietly. Not out of jealousy, protection. Cancer patients spent enormous amounts of time watching people once they became too weak to participate in life normally. Harold must have noticed patterns Jesse ignored. Late nights, excuses, trips, behavior. And instead of confronting Jesse emotionally, Harold collected proof. The realization felt painfully familiar, because Jesse himself was now doing the exact same thing. He scrolled farther down the unfinished email. "I didn't want to believe it. You love her. But men like us don't survive by ignoring evidence. Talk less. Observe more." Jesse shut his eyes. For a moment, grief finally cracked through the numbness. Not because Vanessa betrayed him, because his father died trying to warn him while Jesse sat beside the wrong hospital bed. Jesse pressed both hands against his face. The garage remained silent, except for rainfall and the low hum of computer fans. Eventually, he reopened the email and examined the image metadata carefully. Dates confirmed. Locations confirmed. Nothing accidental. Nothing explainable. His phone vibrated suddenly on the workbench. Vanessa. Again. Jesse ignored it. Seconds later, another text arrived. We need to discuss finances before this gets messy. Jesse looked slowly toward the property documents beside Harold's handwritten letter, then back at Vanessa's message. Something became clear in that moment. Vanessa still believed she understood the man she married. She thought Jesse was emotionally weak because he stayed calm. She thought silence meant confusion. She thought old trucks and worn boots meant limited options. She had no idea Harold Coleman spent years quietly preparing his son for moments exactly like this. Another message appeared. Are you even listening to me? Jesse stared at the glowing screen for several seconds. Then he opened a brand new folder on the desktop. He named it Legal. Jesse Coleman called Diane Mercer on a Tuesday morning at exactly 8:12 a.m. Not because he was emotional, because he was ready. Rain clouds still hung low over Nashville when he parked outside Mercer and Vale Family Law downtown. The office occupied the fourth floor of a renovated brick building overlooking Church Street. Clean glass doors, minimalist lobby, quiet money. Jesse walked in wearing dark jeans, work boots, and a charcoal jacket. The receptionist glanced at him briefly before asking his name. No recognition, no assumption that he belonged there. Jesse was used to that. Diane Mercer, he said calmly. 9:00. The receptionist checked her screen. She'll be with you shortly. Jesse sat near the window, overlooking downtown traffic. Below, businessmen hurried through crosswalks carrying coffee, while construction cranes moved slowly against the gray skyline. His phone buzzed once. Vanessa! He ignored it. Another message arrived immediately after. Are you seriously disappearing like this? Jesse locked the screen again. At 8:57, Diane Mercer herself appeared from the hallway. Mid-40s. Sharp navy suit. No wasted movement. The kind of woman who looked like she had not lost an argument in 20 years. Mr. Coleman. Jesse stood. She shook his hand once and immediately noticed the lack of sleep in his face. You look exhausted. My father died last week. Diane's expression softened for exactly 1 second. Then professionalism returned. Come with me. Her office overlooked the Cumberland River through wide floor-to-ceiling windows. Law books lined dark shelves behind her desk, though Jesse suspected most of her work happened digitally. Diane motioned toward a chair, so she said calmly, Tell me what actually happened. Start from the hospital. Jesse did. No dramatic speeches, no emotional collapse, just timeline. Vanessa's medical scare, Rachel's calls, Harold dying alone. The discharge records, the hotel charges, the footage. Diane listened without interrupting while taking notes in clean, precise handwriting. When Jesse finished, the room stayed quiet for several seconds. Finally, Diane leaned back slightly. You brought evidence. Jesse handed her a flash drive and printed copies. Diane accepted both immediately. Good. No visible surprise. Like she dealt with betrayal professionally every day, which she probably did. She plugged the drive into her office computer and opened the first file. Hospital footage filled the screen. Vanessa walking through the south exit beside Travis Reed. Diane watched without expression. Then she opened the discharge logs. Bank statements, hotel records, every timestamp aligned perfectly. Finally, she removed her glasses slowly. Did you confront her? Not really. Good. Jesse frowned slightly. Diane folded both hands together. Most people destroy their own cases by reacting emotionally too early. Jesse said nothing. Diane studied him carefully now. You're calmer than most clients. My father taught me not to talk before understanding the problem. For the first time, Diane almost smiled. Smart man. Then she became serious again. Listen carefully, Jesse. Tennessee is not automatically favorable in divorce disputes involving infidelity unless financial misconduct or asset concealment becomes relevant. Emotional betrayal alone doesn't always matter legally. Jesse nodded once. I understand, but documented deception does matter, especially if marital assets were used improperly. She tapped the hotel transaction paperwork lightly. This matters. Then she opened the screenshots from Harold's draft email. Her eyes narrowed slightly while reviewing dates. How long do you think the affair has been going on? I don't know. Diane nodded. Good answer. Never assume what you can't prove. Again, Jesse heard Harold in the sentence. Diane continued reviewing files quietly for several minutes. Then she suddenly asked, Who owns your house? Family trust. Technically, that got her attention immediately. Explain. Jesse described Harold's trust structure and the denied equity inquiry Vanessa attempted months earlier. Diane sat back slowly. She doesn't know. I don't think so. The attorney looked toward the river outside her office windows for a second before speaking again. That changes several things. Jesse remained silent. Diane opened another document folder. Tell me about your finances overall. Hospital salary. Independent calibration contracts. Inherited commercial property from my father last week. How valuable? Jesse gave rough numbers. Diane's eyebrows lifted slightly. Again, not dramatic, just recalculating. And your wife believes you're, what exactly? Average, probably. Diane gave the faintest hint of amusement. That may become useful. Jesse leaned back in the chair slowly. For the first time since Harold died, someone else saw the situation clearly without emotion clouding it. Diane organized the papers into neat stacks. Here's what you're going to do, she said calmly. Okay. You continue documenting everything. Messages, financial activity, public posts, no confrontations without records. Jesse nodded. You do not threaten her. You do not warn Travis. You do not post online. I won't. And most importantly, Diane paused deliberately. Do not let guilt make you careless. That sentence hit harder than she probably realized, because guilt had been controlling Jesse since the hospital night, missing Harold's final hours, ignoring warning signs, trusting too easily. Diane's voice softened slightly. You were manipulated during a moment of emotional vulnerability. That matters psychologically, even if courts don't care emotionally. Jesse looked down at his hands. Courts don't care emotionally. The sentence felt brutally accurate. Diane continued. Right now, Vanessa believes she controls the narrative. She already mentioned that. Diane looked up sharply. What exactly did she say? Jesse unlocked his phone and handed it over. Diane read the messages carefully. We need to get our story straight before people start asking questions. You're making yourself look unstable. Don't turn your father's death into guilt manipulation. Diane handed the phone back slowly. That's not grief talking, she said quietly. Jesse knew. He had known for days now. Diane opened her desk drawer and removed a yellow legal pad. Here's what I want next, she wrote while speaking. Full financial exports, joint account activity, property records, insurance policies, social media screenshots, communication logs. And Jesse, yes, if she starts accusing you emotionally, don't defend yourself emotionally. Defend yourself factually. Jesse looked toward the city skyline outside the office windows. Traffic moved steadily below, normal life continuing while his own seemed to split open quietly beneath him. "Can I ask something?" he said. Diane nodded. "Why do people like this think they'll get away with it?" The attorney considered the question carefully before answering. "Because most decent people react emotionally first." She folded the legal pad closed. Manipulative people count on outrage. They know anger creates mistakes. Harold would have liked her. The thought arrived unexpectedly. Then Diane added something else. And because quiet men are often underestimated. The sentence settled heavily in the room. Jesse realized then how completely Vanessa misunderstood him. She thought patience meant weakness. She thought restraint meant confusion. She thought Jesse's silence came from dependency. She never realized silence could also mean observation. Diane stood from behind the desk. "I'll begin preparing options, but don't file yet." Jesse frowned slightly. "Why?" "Because I think there's more." "What kind of more?" Diane looked directly at him. People this comfortable with deception rarely become reckless overnight. Jesse understood immediately. The affair was probably larger than one hotel stay, possibly financial, possibly planned, possibly ongoing for months. Diane walked him toward the office door, then stopped before opening it. "One last thing." Jesse waited. "Truth wins slower than emotion," Diane said calmly. "But it wins." The sentence followed Jesse all the way back downstairs. Outside, Nashville air felt colder than before. His phone buzzed again in his pocket as he reached the sidewalk. Vanessa. This time he answered. "Where are you?" she asked immediately. Jesse looked up at the gray skyline above Church Street. "Working." Vanessa exhaled sharply. "We need to fix this before people start talking." Jesse said nothing. Then Vanessa added the sentence that changed something permanently inside him. "You're making everything harder than it needs to be." Jesse closed his eyes briefly. His father buried 4 days earlier, his marriage collapsing. And still Vanessa spoke as though inconvenience mattered more than truth. When Jesse opened his eyes again, his voice sounded calm. Too calm. "No," he said quietly. "I'm finally making it accurate." Then he ended the call. Vanessa Coleman came home on Thursday evening just after 6. Jesse heard the sound of her white Range Rover before he saw her. The vehicle rolled slowly into the driveway while sunset spread dull orange light across the neighborhood. Children rode bicycles 2 houses down. Someone grilled food nearby. Ordinary suburban life moved peacefully around a marriage collapsing in silence. Jesse sat inside the garage reviewing calibration reports when the engine shut off outside. He did not stand immediately. Through the security monitor mounted near his workbench, he watched Vanessa step out carrying 2 expensive shopping bags and a designer suitcase. No weakness, no exhaustion, no sign of the woman who claimed she could not survive one night alone in a hospital bed. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the fading daylight. Gold bracelets clinked softly against each other as she unlocked the front door. Jesse remained seated for another full minute before finally walking inside. Vanessa stood in the kitchen pouring sparkling water into a glass when he entered. The house smelled faintly of expensive perfume and citrus cleaner. She glanced toward him once. No hug, no apology, No mention of Harold. You finally decided to answer your phone, she asked casually. Jesse leaned one shoulder against the doorway. You finally decided to come home. Vanessa sighed immediately, like she was already exhausted by him. I needed space. Jesse noticed the fresh manicure, the salon receipt still partially visible inside one shopping bag. Space apparently included luxury retail stores. Vanessa took a slow sip from the glass before speaking again. You look terrible. My father died last week. I know that, Jesse. The irritation in her voice arrived too quickly, like grief had become inconvenient for her. Vanessa walked toward the kitchen island and placed her phone face down beside the marble countertop. We need to have an adult conversation. Jesse stayed quiet. She interpreted the silence as permission to continue. You disappearing and acting paranoid isn't healthy. Paranoid? Interesting choice of word. Jesse studied her calmly. Vanessa had always relied heavily on tone control. Soft voice, controlled facial expressions, the ability to sound reasonable while quietly repositioning reality underneath conversations. Jesse saw it clearly now, probably because he finally stopped listening emotionally. Vanessa folded her arms. You left me vulnerable at the hospital during a medical emergency. Jesse almost responded instantly. Almost. Then Diane Mercer's voice returned to him. Do not defend yourself emotionally. So Jesse simply asked, Is that the story you're going with? Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. What's that supposed to mean? You tell me. The room fell still. Outside sprinklers clicked on across a neighbor's lawn. Vanessa looked away first. You're grieving, she said carefully. I understand that. But you're twisting things. Jesse watched her face while she spoke. No tears, no guilt, only strategy. You abandoned me emotionally weeks ago, Vanessa continued. The hospital just made me realize how alone I actually was. Jesse noticed something important then. Every sentence centered her. Not Harold, not the marriage, not betrayal. Only Vanessa's emotional positioning. She walked closer slowly. You know how isolated I felt with you. Jesse looked at the woman he married and realized she genuinely believed language could overpower facts. Maybe it usually worked. Maybe most people reacted too emotionally to resist it. But Jesse had spent the last week staring at timestamps instead of arguments. You left the hospital at 9:18 in the morning, he said quietly. Vanessa froze for half a second, then recovered immediately. So you checked into the Joseph with Travis Reed less than an hour later. Vanessa laughed once, short, disbelieving. Oh my God. Jesse said nothing. You're tracking me now. You used our joint account. That doesn't mean anything happened. Jesse noticed she did not deny being there, only reframed it. Classic. Vanessa stepped closer again. Travis was helping me because I didn't feel emotionally safe around you. Emotionally safe. Jesse almost admired how quickly she weaponized therapeutic language. You made me feel guilty for needing support, she continued. My father died while you were at that hotel. Vanessa exhaled sharply. There it is. Jesse frowned slightly. There what is? You keep using your father to make me the villain. The sentence sat between them like poison. Jesse stared at her for several seconds. Then something inside him cooled permanently. Not anger, finality, because Harold Coleman had been buried only 4 days earlier, and Vanessa already sounded annoyed that his death still mattered. She picked up her glass again. You know what people are going to see, she asked. A woman who had a medical scare and a husband who emotionally checked out. Jesse noticed the wording carefully. Not what happened, what people would see. Narrative again. Control again. Vanessa leaned against the counter. You've always cared more about machines and work than relationships. Jesse almost smiled at the irony. She still believed his silence meant weakness. Still believed his plainclothes and quiet routines meant lack of intelligence. She had absolutely no idea how carefully he had already documented everything. Vanessa took another sip of sparkling water. We can still handle this privately if you stop acting irrational. Jesse looked toward the hallway leading to the garage. Inside his hoodie pocket sat his phone. Recording. Tennessee allowed one-party consent recordings. Diane had made sure Jesse understood that clearly. So before walking into the house 10 minutes earlier, Jesse activated the recorder. Not because he wanted revenge, because Vanessa changed stories too easily. Jesse turned back toward her. You said we needed our stories straight. Vanessa blinked once, then immediately shrugged. Because gossip spreads. You also said I'm making myself look unstable. Well, honestly, she tilted her head slightly. You are. Jesse watched her carefully now. Vanessa had crossed into dangerous territory without realizing it. She thought she was controlling him emotionally. Instead, she was establishing patterns. Manipulation, narrative management, possible financial motivation, all recorded calmly in her own voice. She walked closer until only a few feet separated them. You need to think realistically, she said quietly. People trust me. There it was. Not truth. Trust. Audience perception. Follower loyalty. Jesse looked directly into her eyes for the first time since she came home. What exactly do they trust? Vanessa's jaw tightened. That I'm not cruel. The sentence almost made Jesse laugh. Not because it sounded ridiculous, because she said it with complete confidence. Vanessa continued speaking softly. You disappearing after the hospital already looks suspicious to people close to me. Which people? My friends. Travis. Her expression hardened instantly. You're obsessed with him. No, Jesse answered calmly. I'm documenting him. The sentence hit harder than he expected. Vanessa straightened slowly. For the first time all evening, uncertainty flickered across her face. Tiny, quick, but real. Because manipulators often understood emotion better than evidence. And Jesse had stopped offering emotion entirely. She crossed her arms tighter now. So what? You're building a case against your wife. Jesse thought about Harold's draft email. Talk less, observe more. Then he answered carefully. I'm trying to understand why my father died asking for me while you were leaving a hospital with another man. Vanessa looked away immediately. Only for a second. But Jesse noticed. Then she recovered again. You're exhausted, she said quietly. You're grieving. And honestly, I think you need help. Jesse almost admired the precision. Shift concern onto his mental state. Subtle, plausibly compassionate, dangerous. He realized then how many conversations during their marriage probably ended this exact way without him noticing. Vanessa stepped toward the hallway. I'm taking a shower. We'll talk tomorrow when you calm down. She picked up her phone and suitcase, then paused. One more thing. Jesse waited. If this turns ugly publicly, remember that I know how to communicate better than you do. The statement hung in the kitchen air after she disappeared upstairs. Jesse stood motionless for several seconds. Then he slowly removed his phone from his pocket. The recording timer still moved quietly across the screen. 1 hour, 12 minutes, every word preserved. Upstairs, water began running through the pipes. Jesse stared at the staircase. And for the first time since discovering the affair, he realized Vanessa was not preparing for reconciliation. She was preparing for war. Jesse Coleman filed the internal hospital review request at 6:43 the next morning. Not anonymously, not emotionally, properly. The Vanderbilt Maintenance Compliance Portal required employee credentials, departmental authorization, and a documented operational concern before security footage or access irregularities could be formally investigated. Jesse knew the system well. He had helped repair it 2 years earlier after a server flood damaged half the engineering wing. Most employees treated internal review requests casually. Jesse did not. He filled every section carefully. Concern unauthorized patient movement through restricted maintenance access corridors. Associated risk, improper escort procedure involving non-medical visitor access. Requested review period 8:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. No accusations, no mention of Vanessa, no mention of cheating, only procedural concerns supported by timestamps. Then Jesse attached the relevant logs and submitted everything directly to compliance oversight. The system generated an automatic response review pending. Jesse closed the laptop calmly. Across the garage, morning sunlight filtered through dusty windows onto organized shelves and metal tool cabinets. Outside Nashville, traffic had already begun thickening with commuters heading downtown. His phone buzzed. Diane Mercer. You filed the review? Yes. Good. Did you editorialize anything? No. Diane sounded satisfied. That's why you're useful to me, Jesse. He almost smiled. Useful. Not emotional, not dramatic, just accurate. Diane continued. Hospitals hate procedural liability. If security protocols were bypassed improperly, someone will protect themselves by documenting it honestly. Jesse leaned against the workbench. And if they try covering it up, they won't, if you already preserved copies. Again, Harold's voice echoed underneath the advice. Check twice. Diane lowered her tone slightly. What's Vanessa doing, acting like I'm unstable? That was predictable. Jesse looked toward the closed garage door. She thinks people will believe her. They might. Diane answered calmly. At first, Jesse stayed silent. Because he understood something most people ignored, public sympathy arrived quickly. Truth arrived slowly. But truth lasted longer. After the call ended, Jesse drove to Vanderbilt for his scheduled shift. The hospital looked exactly the same as always. Doctors rushing through automatic doors, families carrying flowers, nurses drinking coffee too fast between shifts. The world never paused because one man lost his father and discovered his marriage was fraudulent. Jesse parked in employee overflow and walked inside carrying his tool case. Several coworkers offered condolences about Harold. Jesse thanked them politely. No one mentioned Vanessa, not directly. Still, Jesse noticed subtle glances from certain employees who followed local wellness influencers online. Whispers travel fast in hospitals, especially attractive stories involving attractive people. At 10:17 a.m., Jesse received a message through the internal compliance portal. Review request escalated. Please report to Security Administration, Level B. Jesse closed the maintenance panel immediately and headed downstairs. The Security Administration offices occupied a quieter section beneath the main hospital complex. No patients wandered here, only staff badges and locked doors. A woman named Carla Jennings greeted him inside a conference room. Late 50s, sharp eyes, no patience for nonsense. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "please sit." Another man entered moments later carrying a printed report folder. Hospital Legal Department. Jesse recognized the badge color immediately. Interesting. Carla opened the folder calmly. "We reviewed your concern regarding restricted patient movement." Jesse nodded once. Carla continued. "The footage confirms your wife exited through a controlled service corridor not intended for standard discharge." Jesse remained expressionless. "Okay." The legal representative adjusted his glasses. Additionally, the visitor who accompanied her was granted temporary parking access through an employee security override. "Who authorized it?" Jesse asked. Carla glanced toward the second folder. "That's currently under review," meaning they already knew. Hospitals only used that language when responsibility existed, but had not yet been finalized publicly. The legal representative continued carefully. "There's another issue." Jesse waited. "Your wife was medically cleared for discharge prior to requesting continued observation." Jesse's jaw tightened slightly. Not surprise. Confirmation. Carla slid a document across the table. Official timestamps. Medical stabilization 7:02 a.m. Discharge authorization 8:53 a.m. Voluntary extended stay request denied. Patient departure 9:18 a.m. accompanied by unauthorized civilian visitor. Jesse read every line slowly. Paper mattered differently than suspicions. This was no longer personal instinct. It was institutional documentation. Carla folded her hands together. "We're also investigating possible policy violations involving an employee who allowed the civilian escort through restricted access. Who? We can't disclose that yet," the legal representative added quietly, "but the review appears substantiated." Substantiated. A clean legal word for, "You were right." Jesse leaned back slightly in the chair. His father would have appreciated the precision. No yelling, no revenge fantasies, just systems documenting failure exactly as designed. Carla studied him carefully now. "You've remained unusually calm through this." Jesse looked toward the conference room window. "My father taught me not to waste reactions before evidence finishes talking." Carla nodded once. "That's rare lately." The meeting ended 15 minutes later. Before Jesse left, the legal representative handed him another sealed copy of the report. Officially, he said this remains confidential pending final review. Jesse accepted it. Understood. Outside the administration wing, the hospital corridors suddenly felt colder. Not emotionally, structurally, because now there was documented institutional misconduct tied directly to Vanessa and Travis. That changed everything. At 12:41 p.m., Jesse's phone lit up again. Vanessa. He answered this time while standing near the maintenance elevators. "What now?" she asked immediately. "Interesting. Not hello. Not how are you. What now?" Jesse stepped aside as a nurse pushed a supply cart past him. "Did Travis use an employee connection to get you out through the south corridor?" Silence. Then Vanessa answered, too quickly. "You're seriously interrogating me. I'm asking a direct question. You're obsessed. Jesse waited. Vanessa lowered her voice. Do you know how controlling this sounds? There it was again. Psychological reframing. Not denial. Never denial anymore. Only repositioning. Jesse spoke calmly. The hospital documented the access violation this morning. Silence again. Longer this time. When Vanessa finally spoke, her voice sounded tighter. You reported me. I reported a procedural breach. You're unbelievable. No, Jesse answered quietly. I'm accurate. Vanessa exhaled sharply into the phone. You're trying to ruin people's careers because you're jealous? Jealous. Interesting word choice. Not grieving husband, not betrayed spouse. Jealous. Jesse almost responded, then stopped himself. Because Diane was right. Manipulative people relied on emotional escalation, and Vanessa was beginning to realize she could no longer control the narrative through language alone. That frightened her. Jesse could hear it now, beneath the anger. What exactly are you trying to accomplish? She demanded. The truth. You sound insane. No, Jesse said calmly. I sound documented. The line went silent. Then Vanessa disconnected. Jesse slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked toward the maintenance wing. Halfway down the corridor, another notification appeared. Unknown number. He opened it immediately. A photo message. Black BMW parked outside Jesse's house the previous night. Then a text underneath. You should stop before things get worse. No signature necessary. Travis Reed. Jesse stared at the screen for several seconds. Threats now. Good. Threats created records too. He forwarded the screenshot directly to Diane Mercer. Her response came less than 2 minutes later. Save everything. Do not respond. Jesse locked the phone again. Then he looked down the long hospital corridor, stretching ahead beneath fluorescent lights. Patients moved slowly past him. Machines beeped softly from nearby rooms. Life continuing mechanically around hidden damage. For the first time since Harold died, Jesse understood exactly what kind of men Vanessa and Travis believed they were dealing with. They thought Jesse was weak because he stayed calm. They thought silence meant surrender. What they never understood was that Jesse spent his entire career inside systems where every failure left a timestamp. And now the system had started recording them too. Travis Reed arrived at Jesse Coleman's garage just after 9:30 Friday night. No warning, no subtlety. The black BMW X5 rolled into the driveway aggressively enough to spray gravel across the pavement before stopping beside Jesse's old Ford truck. Inside the garage, Jesse looked up slowly from the workbench. He had expected this eventually. Men like Travis usually believed pressure solved problems quickly. And Travis Reed looked exactly like the kind of man who had spent most of his adult life confusing confidence with invincibility. Jesse muted the calibration software running on his monitor and stood calmly. The garage lights reflected off organized steel shelves lining the walls. Tool cabinets stood beside diagnostic machines and secured equipment cases. Camera indicators blinked quietly near the ceiling. Most visitors never noticed them. That was intentional. The side garage door opened hard. Travis stepped inside without knocking. Tall, athletic, black quarter-zip sweater stretched across broad shoulders. Expensive watch. Perfect haircut. The smell of cologne entered before he spoke. You, Jesse. Jesse wiped his hands slowly with a shop towel. You already know I am. Travis looked around the garage once. His expression carried immediate dismissal. He saw tools, concrete floors, and old equipment. Not infrastructure, not systems, certainly not danger. Good. That's your security footage hobby I've been hearing about, Travis asked with a smirk. Jesse leaned lightly against the workbench. What do you want? Travis ignored the question and walked farther inside, boots echoing against concrete. You've been causing problems. Jesse stayed silent. That seemed to irritate Travis immediately. Most loud men depended on reactions to measure control. Jesse offered none. Travis stopped beside a diagnostic cart and looked around again. Vanessa told me you've been spiraling. Interesting. Not grieving, not betrayed. Spiraling. Another carefully selected word. Jesse folded the shop towel neatly and placed it on the workbench. She also tell you she left a hospital while my father was dying. Travis shrugged casually. She said your marriage has been dead a long time. The sentence landed flat because Jesse no longer cared what version Vanessa gave other people. Only records mattered now. Travis stepped closer. Look, man, I'm going to help you out here. Jesse almost smiled. Help? That was how men like Travis framed intimidation. You're embarrassing yourself, Travis continued. Hospital complaints, investigations. You're turning personal drama into legal problems. Jesse noticed the wording immediately. Legal problems, meaning Travis already knew the review escalated. Good. Pressure was reaching him too. Jesse crossed his arms calmly. You used restricted hospital access to remove a patient through a service corridor. Travis laughed outright. You sound like a damn parking ticket. Jesse said nothing. Travis's smile faded slightly. Vanessa doesn't want this getting ugly. She should have thought about that before the hotel. Again, Travis did not deny it. Instead, he stepped even closer. You know what your problem is? Jesse waited. You think paperwork matters more than reality. The sentence hung in the garage air. Jesse almost found it fascinating because paperwork was reality once systems became involved. Men like Travis only understood power socially. Attention, influence, perception. Jesse understood institutional reality instead. Contracts, logs, property, recorded behavior, very different battlefield. Travis glanced toward the old Ford truck parked inside. You really think she was going to stay with this forever? There it was. Contempt. Not for Jesse emotionally, for the image of him. The boots, the garage, the quietness. Everything Travis associated with low status. Jesse suddenly understood something important. Vanessa and Travis had probably spent months privately building narratives about him together. The boring husband, the emotionally unavailable technician, the quiet guy too small to notice things. That explained the confidence. Travis walked around slowly now, examining equipment cases near the wall. What even is all this stuff calibration systems? For what medical equipment? Travis nodded vaguely like he didn't care, because he truly didn't understand what he was looking at. To him, it was just complicated machinery inside a mechanic's garage. He missed the secured server rack, the digital monitoring systems, the licensing documents mounted beside the rear office door, the 4 active recording cameras positioned above the ceiling beams. Jesse watched him carefully. Every word, every movement, all preserved automatically. Travis picked up a metal instrument from the table. You know, Vanessa said you barely make eye contact during conversations. Jesse took the instrument gently from his hand and set it back down. Did she mention using my joint account while sleeping with you? That finally triggered irritation. Travis's jaw tightened visibly. You want to know the truth? He asked. Jesse stayed quiet. She stayed because she felt sorry for you. There it was. Cruelty always arrived eventually with people like him. Not because it served strategy, because arrogance made restraint feel unnecessary. Jesse leaned back against the workbench again. My father was dying, and the word echoed through the garage. Flat, careless. For the first time in weeks, Jesse felt genuine anger move through him. Not explosive, heavy, controlled. Because Harold Coleman spent his entire life helping men exactly like Travis without asking for anything in return. And this stranger reduced his death to inconvenience. Travis mistook Jesse's silence for weakness immediately. You should sign the divorce papers when they come, he continued. Dragging this out won't end well for you. Interesting. Not if, when. Meaning Vanessa already planned legal action too. Good to know. Jesse looked calmly toward the blinking server lights near the back wall, then back at Travis. You threatening me? Travis smirked. No. I'm telling you how the world works. Jesse almost pitied him then. Because Travis genuinely believed influence protected people from consequences. Probably because it usually had. Pretty women. Expensive memberships. Social connections. Men like him floated through life assuming systems existed for other people. He had no idea whose room he was standing inside. Travis stepped closer again. Vanessa's got people on her side. Followers, sponsors, friends. You've got what Jesse looked around the garage slowly. Tools, servers, backup drives, licenses, records. His father's toolbox against the wall. Then he answered quietly. Documentation. Travis laughed again, but weaker this time. Because somewhere underneath the arrogance, he was beginning to sense something wrong. Jesse reached toward the workbench and calmly picked up a clipboard. Routine motion. Nothing threatening. Still, Travis's posture shifted instantly. Defensive. Interesting. Relax, Jesse said quietly. You said you came to help. Travis looked annoyed now. I came because Vanessa's stressed out. You're making her life hell. Jesse stared directly at him. My father died while she was in your hotel room. Travis rolled his eyes. Jesus Christ, man. People die. The sentence changed everything. Not legally, personally, because Jesse suddenly realized there was absolutely nothing redeemable standing in front of him. Not confused morality, not complicated emotion, just selfishness, protected by confidence. The garage stayed silent for several seconds. Then Jesse asked calmly, Did you know she told me she thought she was dying? Travis frowned. What? At the hospital. Travis's expression shifted slightly. Tiny, quick, but real. He didn't know that part. Good. That meant Vanessa manipulated both sides differently. Jesse noticed Travis recalculating internally now, trying to understand how much Jesse knew, how much Vanessa lied, how exposed everyone actually was. Then Travis made his mistake. You should stop recording things before somebody gets hurt. The sentence came out low, not loud, not theatrical. A threat disguised as advice. Jesse looked slowly upward toward the nearest ceiling camera. Travis followed his eyes automatically and finally noticed it. Then another, then the recording light above the rear office. For the first time all night, uncertainty fully entered his face. Jesse spoke quietly. You picked the only room I built to record failures. The garage fell completely silent. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond Hendersonville. And Travis Reed suddenly understood he had walked into the wrong man's workspace. The divorce filing reached Vanessa Coleman on a Monday morning at 10:16 a.m. Jesse knew the exact time because Diane Mercer copied him on the service confirmation the moment it was completed. Outside the Davison County Courthouse, reporters crowded around another unrelated hearing involving a local councilman. Nobody noticed the quiet technician walking through side entrances carrying a slim black document case. Jesse preferred it that way. Rainwater still clung to the courthouse steps from an early storm. Lawyers moved through metal detectors with coffee cups and overstuffed folders, while deputies guided people toward assigned courtrooms. Inside courtroom 4B, everything smelled faintly of paper-old wood and recycled air. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later. Not alone. A female attorney in a cream-colored suit walked beside her, carrying a leather portfolio. Vanessa herself looked polished enough for television. White blouse, soft makeup, controlled expression. The exact image of a composed woman dragged unfairly into conflict. Travis Reed was not present, probably advised against it. Good legal advice for once. Jesse sat beside Diane quietly near the front row while Vanessa scanned the room. The moment she spotted him, her expression shifted. Not sadness, shock, because Jesse was not reacting the way she expected. No public confrontation, no emotional breakdown, just documents. Diane leaned slightly toward him. She's nervous. How can you tell? She overdressed for sympathy. Jesse almost smiled. The judge entered moments later. Judge Eleanor Whitmore. Late 60s. Sharp reading glasses, the kind of woman who looked immune to emotional theatrics after decades inside family court. Everyone stood briefly, then sat. Vanessa folded her hands carefully on the table while her attorney began speaking first. Your Honor, my client believes this divorce has escalated unnecessarily during a period of emotional grief following the passing of Mr. Coleman's father. Interesting. Already framing Jesse's grief as instability. Diane remained perfectly calm. Judge Whitmore looked toward Vanessa briefly. And the affair allegations, Vanessa's attorney answered immediately. There is no substantiated infidelity, Your Honor. Only emotional assumptions amplified by mourning and communication breakdowns. Jesse watched Vanessa lower her eyes at exactly the right moment. Controlled vulnerability. Practiced. Probably effective online. Judge Whitmore turned toward Diane. And your response? Diane stood slowly. No dramatic tone. No raised voice. Your Honor, we are not presenting assumptions today. We are presenting timelines. Then she handed the clerk a binder. Thick, organized, precise. Jesse recognized every section immediately. Hospital records, security footage timestamps, financial statements, property documentation, recorded communications, everything categorized cleanly. Judge Whitmore opened the binder silently while Diane continued. Mrs. Coleman requested emotional support from her husband during what she described as a medical emergency. During those same hours, Mr. Coleman's father was actively dying. Vanessa shifted slightly in her seat. Diane continued without looking at her. Mrs. Coleman then voluntarily discharged herself from Vanderbilt University Medical Center and exited through a restricted access corridor accompanied by Mr. Travis Reed. Vanessa's attorney interrupted quickly. "That does not prove infidelity." "No," Diane answered calmly. "The hotel records do." Then she slid another document forward. "The Joseph Nashville Hotel charges, joint marital account usage, room service timestamps, vehicle logs." Judge Whitmore reviewed them carefully. The courtroom became very quiet. Vanessa finally spoke for the first time. "Your Honor, Travis was supporting me emotionally." Judge Whitmore looked up slowly. "During your husband's father's funeral week?" Vanessa hesitated, only briefly. But Jesse noticed, because he noticed everything now. Vanessa straightened slightly. "My marriage had been emotionally neglectful for years." There it was again. Not denial, narrative repositioning. Jesse remained still while Diane opened another section of the binder. "Your Honor, we also have recorded statements." Vanessa's attorney objected immediately. Judge Whitmore raised one hand. "Legal recordings." "Yes, Your Honor." "Tennessee, one-party consent." "Approved." The courtroom speakers activated quietly. Vanessa's own voice filled the room. "People will believe me. You're making yourself look unstable. We need to get our stories straight." Jesse watched the color leave Vanessa's face slowly. Not dramatically, just enough. Diane let the silence linger after the recording ended. Then she spoke softly. "The concern here is not emotional complexity. It is intentional manipulation during a medical crisis and subsequent attempts to manage perception rather than truth." Judge Whitmore removed her glasses briefly, then looked directly at Vanessa. "Mrs. Coleman, why did you tell your husband you feared being alone medically if you were stable enough to leave voluntarily with another man?" Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, looked toward her attorney. No immediate answer arrived, because facts created narrow spaces for performance. Her attorney finally intervened. "My client was emotionally overwhelmed." Judge Whitmore nodded once. "That appears clear." The sentence sounded neutral. It was not. Diane opened the final section of the binder. Property and trust documents. Now Vanessa truly looked confused. Jesse saw it immediately. She leaned toward her attorney, whispering something urgently. The attorney's posture changed too. Concern now. Real concern. Diane spoke calmly. "The marital residence belongs to the Coleman Family Trust, established years before the marriage." Vanessa stared directly at Jesse then. For the first time since this began, her mask cracked completely. Not grief. Calculation failing. She genuinely did not know. Diane continued. "The East Nashville commercial property and medical calibration business are also protected inherited assets finalized prior to current proceedings." Judge Whitmore reviewed the paperwork quietly. Vanessa looked stunned, because she finally understood something humiliating. The quiet husband she underestimated had never been financially powerless. He simply never advertised himself. Jesse watched realization spread slowly across her face. All those years, she mocked his truck, his work clothes, his garage. She thought simplicity meant lack. Judge Whitmore looked toward Vanessa again. Mrs. Coleman, were you aware your husband independently owned commercial medical calibration contracts? Vanessa hesitated too long. No. The judge nodded slowly. Interesting. Diane spoke again. There is also documented evidence Mrs. Coleman previously attempted to access equity against trust-protected property without authorization. Vanessa turned sharply toward Jesse. You investigated me. Jesse finally spoke for the first time, all hearing. No, I paid attention. The courtroom went silent again. Vanessa looked at him differently now. Not superior anymore. Not dismissive. Uncertain. Because for the first time she understood the full man she married. Quietness had never been emptiness. It had been discipline. Her attorney attempted recovery quickly. Your Honor, regardless of financial misunderstandings, my client maintains that emotional isolation contributed heavily to marital deterioration. Judge Whitmore closed the binder slowly. Emotional isolation does not justify deception during a dying parent's final hours. The sentence landed hard. Vanessa lowered her eyes immediately. Diane remained still beside Jesse. No celebration, no sogness, because this was not entertainment. It was evidence reaching conclusion. Then Judge Whitmore added something else while reviewing the hospital review summary. There also appears to be an active internal investigation involving unauthorized hospital access. Vanessa's attorney stiffened visibly. Good. That part frightened them more than divorce. Institutional misconduct created consequences beyond reputation. Judge Whitmore scheduled the next proceedings calmly before standing. Court adjourned. People began gathering papers quietly around the room. Vanessa remained seated several seconds longer than everyone else. Then finally, she looked toward Jesse. You planned all this? Jesse closed the document case slowly. No. His voice stayed calm. You did. Vanessa stared at him silently. And for the first time since the hospital night, she looked genuinely afraid of what came next. Vanessa Coleman learned the truth about the house 3 days after the hearing. Not from Jesse, from her own attorney. The realization hit inside a conference room overlooking downtown Nashville while rain hammered softly against the windows. The property is protected under the Coleman Family Trust, the attorney explained carefully. Your name was never attached to ownership. Vanessa stared across the table in disbelief. That can't be right. The attorney slid documents toward her. Recorded trust filings, tax records. Transfer structures signed years before she married Jesse. Everything legal. Everything airtight. Vanessa read the pages twice. Then a third time. Still no loophole appeared. Because Jesse had never hidden the truth. He simply never performed wealth the way people like Vanessa expected. No luxury vehicles. No designer watches. No expensive social media lifestyle. Just old boots, a quiet garage, and a man who repaired things carefully. Vanessa finally understood how badly she misjudged him, and the realization humiliated her. Not because Jesse secretly lived like a millionaire, because he never needed validation badly enough to advertise what he owned. Outside the law office, Travis Reed waited inside his BMW. The moment Vanessa entered the passenger seat, he knew something was wrong. What happened? Vanessa removed her sunglasses angrily. The house isn't ours. Travis frowned. What it belongs to some trust his father built. Silence filled the vehicle. Then Travis leaned back slowly. You're kidding. Vanessa shook her head hard. He owns the garage property too, and the calibration business. Travis stared ahead through the windshield for several seconds. For the first time since this began, he looked uncertain too, because men like Travis measured power externally. Money, property, leverage, and suddenly, Jesse Coleman no longer looked like a quiet technician driving an old truck. He looked dangerous. Vanessa crossed her arms tightly. He lied. Travis glanced toward her. No, he answered carefully. He just never told you. That sentence irritated her immediately. You're taking his side now, I'm taking reality's side. Vanessa looked away toward the rain-streaked window. Reality. That word had started appearing too often lately. In courtrooms, documents, recorded conversations, hospital investigations. Jesse kept forcing everything back toward facts, and facts were becoming difficult to survive. Meanwhile, Jesse spent that same afternoon inside Harold's old East Nashville garage. The building smelled exactly the way he remembered. Metal dust, motor oil, cold concrete, rain leaking faintly through one corner of the roof. He stood alone in the center of the massive workspace while late sunlight filtered through dirty overhead windows. Old hydraulic lifts still sat in place beneath hanging chains and rusted beams. Tool cabinets lined entire walls. Half-disassembled equipment rested beneath tarps untouched for years. Harold had kept everything. Jesse walked slowly across the floor, running one hand along an old welding table. His father's fingerprints felt everywhere here. Not literally, structurally. Every shelf precisely organized, every drawer labeled, every machine maintained, even after retirement. Rachel entered through the side door carrying coffee 20 minutes later. You weren't kidding, she said quietly, while looking around. Jesse accepted the cup. I forgot how big this place was. Rachel walked farther inside slowly. He left all this to you, most of it. She shook her head in disbelief. And Vanessa had no idea Jesse leaned against the old workbench. She thought I barely made enough to matter. Rachel gave a humorless laugh. That woman spent 5 years married to the wrong stereotype. Jesse looked around the garage again. The sentence felt accurate. Vanessa built entire assumptions around appearances. Old truck meant unsuccessful. Quietness meant weakness. Work boots meant limited options. She never noticed Jesse paid off debt early. Never noticed Harold quietly transferring assets. Never noticed the independent calibration contracts growing every year. Because those things were not visible online. Rachel sat on the edge of a steel tool chest. You know she's getting destroyed online now, right? Jesse frowned slightly. I'm not looking. Well, people figured out Travis was with her during the funeral week. Jesse said nothing. He truly did not care anymore. Not about followers. Not about comments. Social media outrage burned hot and disappeared fast. Real consequences lasted longer. Rachel continued. Several sponsors already dropped her. Okay. She's blaming you privately. Jesse looked toward the far wall where Harold once painted measurements directly onto concrete blocks. For what? For making everything public. Jesse almost smiled at the absurdity. He never posted anything publicly once. Not one screenshot, not one accusation. Everything happened because Vanessa herself could not stop performing emotionally online while evidence quietly accumulated underneath her. Rachel watched him carefully. You really don't hate her anymore, do you? Jesse thought about the question honestly. Weeks earlier, the answer would have been complicated. Now it felt strangely simple. No, he said quietly. Rachel looked surprised. Seriously? Jesse nodded once. Hate takes energy. What do you feel then? Jesse looked around Harold's garage. At the old tools, the organized shelves, the quiet evidence of a man who built stability without needing applause. Clear, Jesse answered. Rachel stared at him for several seconds before speaking again. You sound exactly like Dad. That sentence stayed in the air between them. Because Harold Coleman never wasted energy trying to control dishonest people. He controlled his own work, his own records, his own response. Nothing else. Rachel stood and walked toward an old framed photograph hanging near the office doorway. Harold beside Jesse at 16 years old, rebuilding an engine together, grease on both faces, neither smiling properly. Rachel shook her head softly. You know what's crazy? What Dad saw Vanessa before you did. Jesse leaned against the workbench silently. Yes, and he still never tried to poison you against her, no. Because Harold understood something important. People only truly see betrayal once evidence and behavior align inside their own mind, not before. Rachel looked toward Jesse again. So what happens now? Jesse thought carefully before answering. Diane finishes the divorce, and Travis Jesse shrugged slightly. The hospital investigation handles him. That part was already moving quietly. One security employee suspended. Compliance review expanding. Potential legal exposure growing. Systems correcting themselves slowly. Exactly the way Harold believed justice usually worked. Not dramatically, methodically. Rain intensified outside again. Water drummed against the roof while Jesse walked deeper into the garage toward an old storage office in the back. Inside sat filing cabinets packed with decades of paperwork. Service records, contracts, receipts. Harold documented everything. Jesse smiled faintly. Of course he did. Rachel appeared behind him holding another old photo frame. You keeping this place. Jesse looked around slowly. For the first time since Harold died, the future no longer looked empty, difficult, painful, but not empty. Yes, he answered quietly. Rachel smiled. Good. Jesse stepped back into the main garage floor. The enormous building echoed softly around him beneath hanging industrial lights. He could almost hear Harold's voice somewhere underneath the silence. Not sentimental, practical. Keep building. Outside thunder rolled low across Nashville. And somewhere across the city, Vanessa Coleman was finally learning the difference between appearing valuable and actually being valuable. Meanwhile, Jesse stood inside a garage his father spent years preparing for him. Not flashy, not glamorous, solid, real. And for the first time since the hospital night, Jesse realized he was no longer surviving the collapse of his marriage. He was already standing inside whatever came after it. 6 months after Harold Coleman's funeral, the East Nashville garage no longer looked abandoned. The cracked exterior walls had been repainted charcoal gray. New industrial lighting hung above the main work floor. Fresh calibration stations lined the western side of the building, beside organized equipment racks and sealed diagnostic storage cases. A clean metal sign now stood near the entrance, Coleman, calibration and compliance. Jesse installed it himself on a cold October morning before sunrise. No grand opening, No social media campaign, no ribbon-cutting photographs, just work. The way Harold would have wanted it. Inside the garage, machines hummed steadily, while Rachel organized invoices near the front office. She had officially joined the company 3 months earlier after leaving her bookkeeping job at a small insurance agency in Hendersonville. Turns out she was good at operations. Very good. Especially when paired with Jesse's technical precision. Together, they rebuilt Harold's quiet business into something larger. Not flashy, reliable. Small rural hospitals across Tennessee began contacting them after word spread about Jesse's accuracy and response times. Equipment inspections, compliance reviews, emergency recalibrations. The kind of work nobody notices until it fails, which suited Jesse perfectly. On most mornings, he arrived before dawn wearing the same old work boots Vanessa once mocked at dinner parties. Only now nobody mistook them for weakness, because men from clinics and surgical centers waited weeks for Jesse's schedule to open. Respect had replaced assumption. Not because Jesse changed who he was, because truth eventually reached the surface. Late afternoon sunlight stretched through the garage windows while Jesse adjusted settings on a portable infusion pump analyzer near Bay 3. Rachel approached holding a clipboard. Franklin Pediatric signed the annual contract. Jesse looked up. For all locations, all 3. He nodded once. Good contract. Stable. Rachel leaned against the workbench, smiling faintly. Dad would lose his mind if he saw this place now. Jesse glanced around the garage. The old hydraulic lifts remained, though cleaned and restored. Harold's original toolbox still sat against the rear wall, exactly where he left it. Above the office doorway hung a framed photograph of Harold, standing beside Jesse years earlier, holding a rebuilt transmission between them. Not posed, not smiling, working. Jesse looked at the picture for a second longer than usual. Some days the grief still arrived unexpectedly. While hearing a certain song, passing Harold's favorite gas station, seeing older men in hardware stores reaching automatically for reading glasses. Loss never disappeared cleanly. It just stopped controlling every room. Rachel followed his gaze toward the photograph. "You okay?" Jesse nodded once. "Yeah." And for the first time in a long while, it was true. Not because the betrayal hurt less, because it no longer defined the center of his life. His phone buzzed quietly on the workbench. New email. Rachel noticed immediately. Vanessa Jesse checked the screen. Yes. Subject line. "Can we talk privately?" Rachel made a face. "She's still trying." Jesse opened the message slowly. Short, careful, different tone than before. No accusations, no manipulation, just restraint. "I know I probably don't deserve a response, but I'd like the chance to talk honestly for once." Jesse stared at the words for several seconds. Interesting sentence. For once. Even Vanessa now understood how much dishonesty filled the marriage. Rachel crossed her arms. "You?" Answering Jesse, thought carefully before speaking. Outside sunset painted the Nashville skyline orange beyond the garage doors. Workers finished loading equipment into company vans, while country music played quietly from an old radio near the office. Peace. Real peace. Not performance. Not online branding. Something earned slowly through truth and structure. Finally, Jesse closed the email. "No." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "That's it. She can talk to Diane." Rachel smiled faintly. Cold. Practical. Very Harold Coleman. Jesse almost laughed. Instead, he returned to calibrating the analyzer carefully. Numbers mattered. Precision mattered. Machines either passed inspection or failed. Simple. Honest. Unlike people. An hour later, the last employee left for the evening. Silence settled slowly across the garage. Jesse completed final paperwork near the front office before shutting down the diagnostic systems one by one. The overhead lights dimmed in sections as he moved through the building. By the time he reached the main garage doors, only the office lamp near Harold's photograph remained glowing softly behind him. Jesse paused there for a moment. His father's old coffee mug still sat on the shelf beneath the picture. Cracked handle. Faded Titans logo. Rachel kept trying to throw it away. Jesse never let her. Outside, cool October air drifted through the open garage entrance. Jesse stepped onto the concrete loading area and looked out across East Nashville. Traffic moved steadily in the distance beneath glowing streetlights. Somewhere nearby, live music drifted faintly from a rooftop bar. Life continuing, always continuing. His phone buzzed once more. Another email notification from Vanessa. Jesse did not open it this time, not out of anger, out of completion. Some conversations no longer mattered once truth finished speaking. He locked the garage doors carefully and pocketed the keys. Then he stood there one last moment beneath the evening sky. 6 months earlier, he sat beside the wrong hospital bed while his father died asking for him. At the time, Jesse believed his life had collapsed completely. Now he understood something else. Losing illusions hurt, but losing illusions also revealed structure underneath them. Vanessa taught him how easily charm manipulates perception. Harold taught him something stronger. Quiet work survives longer than performance. Documentation survives longer than emotion. And calm men are often the last people dishonest ones should underestimate. Jesse looked back once through the garage windows. The restored building glowed warmly in the dark. Solid, steady, built carefully over time, just like the man standing outside it. Then Jesse turned off the final light and walked toward his truck alone. Not abandoned, not broken, just finished waiting for someone who already chose to leave. Sometimes the deepest betrayal is not the cheating itself. It's realizing someone watched your loyalty, your patience, and your love, and treated them like weaknesses instead of gifts. Jesse lost the final hours with his father because he believed protecting the woman he loved mattered most. That regret never disappeared completely, but neither did the lesson Harold left behind. Calm thinking sees farther than emotional panic ever will. A lot of people watching this have probably experienced something similar in smaller ways. Maybe someone underestimated you because you were quiet. Maybe someone confused kindness with weakness. Or maybe you stayed loyal to someone long after they stopped deserving it. The painful truth is that manipulation often works best against good people. But truth has one advantage: lies never do. It survives pressure. If you've ever had someone betray your trust while pretending to care about you, share your story in the comments. I read them all, and a lot of people here will understand exactly what you went through. And if this story stayed with you until the end, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story is about a janitor everyone ignored for years, until a hospital audit exposed who actually controlled the entire building.